The drought had claimed everything but Eleanor Parker's pride as she stared at the empty pantry, her husband's drunken snores echoing from their bedroom like an accusation. Colorado Territory, 1875, was unforgiving to women with empty cupboards and children with hollow cheeks, especially when the money for food vanished into the saloons of Broken Ridge. Eleanor gripped the wooden shelf, her knuckles whitening. The $3 she had carefully saved and hidden beneath the loose floorboard gone. William had found it, just as he always did, his fingers seeming to possess a wicked talent for discovering the money she squirreled away. Money meant for flour, beans, and maybe a bit of sugar for little Michael's 5th birthday next week. "Mama," Michael's small voice came from behind her. "Is there anything for breakfast?" Eleanor turned, forcing a smile. At 7 months pregnant with their second child, she couldn't hide the swell of her belly, nor the fact that they hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days. "We're going to try something new today, sweetheart," she said, reaching for her shawl. "We're going foraging." She didn't mention that they would be foraging through town, not for berries but for charity or work anything to put food on the table. The thought burned like bile in her throat. Parker women didn't beg. Her mother had taught her that much before consumption had taken her 5 years ago. William hadn't always been this way. When they'd married 3 years ago, he'd been a hard-working ranch hand with dreams of his own spread someday. Then came the mining accident that crushed his leg, the laudanum for the pain, and finally the whiskey that never stopped. Eleanor tied her bonnet under her chin, wishing her honey-brown hair wasn't so lank from lack of proper washing. Her blue dress, once her Sunday best, now served as her everyday wear, patched in several places but still clean. Appearances mattered in Broken Ridge, especially for a woman about to swallow her pride. "We'll be back before your pa wakes," she promised Michael, taking his small hand in hers. The April morning was cool but held the promise of the scorching summer to come. Broken Ridge was stirring to life, shopkeepers opening their doors, the blacksmith's hammer already ringing, and the inevitable cluster of men outside the saloon, even at this early hour. Eleanor walked with her head high past Mac Gregor's general store, where her credit had been refused last week. Past Widow Jenkins, who crossed the street rather than meet Eleanor's eyes. The shame of a drunkard husband was apparently contagious. Past the church, where the Reverend's wife had suggested, with poisonous kindness, that perhaps Eleanor should pray harder for her husband's redemption. The livery stable at the edge of town was her destination. Old Mr. Hawkins sometimes had odd jobs, and he'd been kind to her before. But as she approached, she saw not the stooped figure of Hawkins but a tall stranger leading a magnificent black stallion from the stables. The man wore no fancy duds, just practical riding clothes covered in the dust of the trail, but something in his bearing made Eleanor pause. He stood straight as a pine, with broad shoulders and movements that suggested both strength and careful control. When he turned, she saw a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of a summer storm. Those eyes met hers, and for a moment, Eleanor forgot her mission, her empty pantry, even her growling stomach. Then Michael tugged at her hand, bringing her back to reality. "Good morning," the stranger said, his voice deep and smooth as creek water over stones. Eleanor nodded stiffly. "Is Mr. Hawkins about? I was hoping he might have work." The stranger studied her, taking in her worn dress, her swollen belly, and the thin child at her side. There was no pity in his gaze, something Eleanor was grateful for, but there was a quiet assessment. Mr. Hawkins had to ride out to his daughter's place. Fever took hold of his grandson. The stranger removed his hat, revealing dark hair shot through with silver at the temples. Name's Xavier Grant. "I'm looking after things until he returns." Eleanor hesitated. Introducing herself meant admitting who she was, William Parker's wife, and all the judgment that came with it. But her stomach growled audibly, making the decision for her. "I'm Eleanor Parker. This is my son, Michael." Recognition flickered in Xavier Grant's eyes, but he simply nodded. "Pleased to meet you both. Michael, usually shy with strangers, stared openly at Xavier's holstered revolver and the silver concho belt around his waist. "Are you a real cowboy, mister?" A smile crinkled the corners of Xavier's eyes. "I suppose I am. I work cattle for the Triple R Ranch over in Eagle Valley." "What brings you to Broken Ridge?" Eleanor asked, curiosity momentarily overriding her desperate circumstances. "Business with the railroad," he said simply, then glanced at the stables. "Mr. Hawkins mentioned he needed help mucking stalls and grooming the boarders. Is that what you were looking for, Mrs. Parker?" It wasn't ladies' work, but Eleanor nodded firmly. "I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Grant." "I can tell." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "There's morning work and evening work to be done, 2 bits for each shift. 4 bits a day would buy flour, beans, maybe even a bit of salt pork." Eleanor felt a flutter of hope. "When can I start?" "Right now, if you've a mind to. My son can help or rest in the tack room. There's clean straw and it's warm." Eleanor nodded, relief washing through her. "Thank you, Mr. Grant." "Xavier," he corrected, then looked down at Michael. "Do you like horses, young man?" Michael nodded eagerly. "Then I might have a special job for you too." By midday, Eleanor's back ached and her hands were blistered, but 6 stalls were clean and 3 horses groomed until their coats gleamed. Michael had been put in charge of filling water troughs, a task he took with solemn seriousness. When noon came, Xavier disappeared, returning with a cloth-wrapped package that he set on a hay bale. "Thought you both might be hungry," he said, unwrapping thick slices of bread, cheese, and apples. Eleanor's stomach clenched at the sight, but pride made her hesitate. "We don't need charity, Mr. Grant." His gray eyes met hers steadily. "It's not charity to share food with folks working alongside you, Mrs. Parker. It's common decency." The simple statement, delivered without judgment, broke through her resistance. She nodded gratefully and called Michael over. They ate slowly, savoring every bite while Xavier checked his stallion's shoes. "Your horse is beautiful," Eleanor said, breaking the silence. "Midnight's more partner than horse," Xavier replied, running a hand down the stallion's gleaming neck. "Been with me through thick and thin these past 8 years. Are you passing through Broken Ridge or staying?" she asked, curious despite herself about this quiet man who offered work and bread without questions. "Depends on how my business goes," he said. "I'm looking to buy a small spread near here. Railroad's coming through and this valley has good water and grass." "The Wilkins place is for sale," Michael piped up. "Papa said Mr. Wilkins died and his city family wants to sell." Eleanor tensed at the mention of William, but Xavier just nodded thoughtfully. "That might be worth looking into. Thank you for the information, Michael." As they finished eating, Eleanor noticed Xavier studying her with those perceptive gray eyes. "If you're up for it, there's evening work too," he said. "And tomorrow, Hawkins won't be back for at least a week." The offer was a lifeline. "Yes, I'll be here." "Good." He handed her 2 shiny quarters. "Morning's pay." Eleanor clutched the coins, already calculating how much flour they would buy. "I should get Michael home for his nap." Xavier nodded. "See you at sundown, Mrs. Parker." As Eleanor walked home, coins tucked safely in her pocket and Michael chattering about horses beside her, she felt something she hadn't in months, a small, fragile hope. That hope wavered when she found William awake and irritable. His bloodshot eyes narrowed at the sight of them. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his words slurring slightly. The previous night's whiskey still clung to him, sour and stale. "Looking for work," Eleanor answered truthfully, ushering Michael toward his small room off the kitchen. William snorted. "Find any?" "Yes, at the livery stable." His laugh was harsh. "Hawkins took pity on you, did he?" Eleanor bit back a sharp retort. Arguments only made things worse. "Mr. Hawkins is away. His friend is watching the stable." William's gaze sharpened. "What friend?" "A man named Xavier Grant. He's paying fair wages for honest work." William struggled to his feet, favoring his bad leg. Once he'd been handsome, tall, and strong with laughing blue eyes that had made Eleanor's heart skip. Now his face was bloated, his wheat-colored hair limp and unwashed. "Let me see what he paid you," he demanded, hand outstretched. Eleanor's heart sank. "William, we need food, let me see." His voice rose dangerously. Reluctantly, she withdrew one coin, keeping the other hidden in her skirt pocket. A small deception, but necessary. William snatched the quarter, turning it over in his fingers. "I need this." "For what?" The words escaped before Eleanor could stop them. "More whiskey. While your son goes hungry," his face darkened. "I've got a chance to win big tonight. Jenkins says there's a high-stakes game, gambling. William, please don't tell me what to do in my own house." He shouted, causing Michael to peek fearfully from his doorway. William noticed and moderated his tone. "I'll win enough to buy groceries for a month, you'll see." The familiar promise, hollow as their pantry. Eleanor said nothing as William limped to the door. "Don't wait up," he called over his shoulder. When the door closed, Eleanor sagged against the wall, her hand protectively covering her swollen belly. The baby kicked, as if reminding her to stay strong. "Mama," Michael's small voice came from his doorway. "Are we going back to see the horses tonight?" Eleanor straightened, drawing a deep breath. "Yes, sweetheart, after your nap." As promised, they returned to the livery at sunset. To Eleanor's surprise, Xavier had prepared a small workspace for Michael in the tack room with a slate and chalk. "Thought he might like to draw while you work," Xavier explained. "My nephew's about his age, likes to draw horses for hours." The simple thoughtfulness almost brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. She blinked them away quickly and got to work. As Eleanor brushed down a chestnut mare, Xavier worked nearby, replacing worn leather on a bridle. The companionable silence was broken only by the occasional soft nicker from the horses and Michael's chalk scratching on slate. "Your boy has a good eye," Xavier commented later, glancing at Michael's drawing of Midnight. "He got the spirit of the horse, not just the shape." Eleanor smiled. "He loves animals, always has." "Smart boy," Xavier said. "Animals don't lie about who they are." Unlike people, hung unspoken in the air between them. As they worked side by side in the lantern light, Eleanor found herself stealing glances at Xavier. There was a steadiness to him that she found comforting. His hands, strong and calloused, moved with surprising gentleness over the horses. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. When the work was done, Xavier again produced food, this time a hearty stew in a covered pot from the hotel restaurant. "You shouldn't keep feeding us," Eleanor protested, even as her stomach growled at the savory aroma. "I've never been one for eating alone," Xavier replied simply, handing her a bowl. Over the meal, Michael peppered Xavier with questions about ranch life, cattle drives, and horseback riding. Xavier answered each one patiently, occasionally telling stories that made Michael's eyes widen with wonder. Eleanor found herself smiling more than she had in months. As they prepared to leave, Xavier handed Eleanor another coin. "For tonight's work." "Thank you." She hesitated, then asked, "Will you still need help tomorrow?" "Every day until Hawkins returns," Xavier confirmed. "Both morning and evening if you're willing." "We'll be here," Eleanor promised. The walk home was darker now, the town's few lamps casting pools of golden light on the dusty street. Eleanor clutched Michael's hand tighter as they passed the saloon, the raucous laughter and tinny piano spilling out into the night. She quickened her pace, hoping to avoid any drunks stumbling out, but a familiar voice called her name. "Eleanor? Eleanor Parker." She turned reluctantly to see Sarah Miller, the dressmaker's wife, hurrying toward her. "I haven't seen you in an age," Sarah said, eyeing Eleanor's pregnant belly and worn dress with poorly disguised curiosity. "How are you managing?" The question held no genuine concern, only hunger for gossip. Eleanor straightened her shoulders. "Quite well, thank you," she replied coolly. Sarah's gaze flicked to Michael, then back to Eleanor. "I heard William's been having a streak of bad luck at the tables. Such a shame." "My husband's affairs are his own," Eleanor said stiffly. Sarah leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I also heard you were seen at the livery with that stranger Grant, is it? Quite handsome for a man his age." Heat rushed to Eleanor's cheeks. "I'm working for Mr. Grant while Mr. Hawkins is away, nothing more." Sarah's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course, dear. We all do what we must in hard times. She patted Eleanor's arm. Well, good evening to you both. As Sarah walked away, Eleanor felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders, the judgment of a town that had already decided what kind of woman she was, based solely on who her husband had become. At home, there was no sign of William. Eleanor put Michael to bed and then sat by the window, darning socks by the light of their last candle. Outside, an owl called into the darkness, its mournful cry matching the ache in her heart. She hadn't always been this lonely. Once William had read to her in the evenings, his voice warm and lively as he acted out all the characters. They dreamed together, planned together. Where had that man gone? Was he still somewhere inside the bitter shell that now wore his face? Eleanor's hands stilled on her mending as she heard footsteps on the porch. The door swung open to reveal William, swaying slightly. "You're still up," he said, surprise evident in his slurred voice. "I was waiting for you." Eleanor set aside her darning. "Did you win your game?" William's face clouded. "Jenkins cheated. I know he did." He fumbled in his pocket and threw several coins on the table, far fewer than he'd started with. "But I saved some, for food." Eleanor stared at the pitiful pile of money, not even enough for half a sack of flour. "Thank you," she said quietly. William lurched toward her, dropping to his knees beside her chair. To her surprise, he laid his head in her lap, his shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry, Ellie," he whispered, using the pet name he hadn't spoken in months. "I'm so sorry." Eleanor's hand hovered over his head before gently stroking his hair. These moments of clarity and remorse had become rare, but they reminded her of the man she'd married, the man who might still exist somewhere beneath the alcohol and bitterness. "We'll be all right," she murmured, not sure if she believed it anymore. William looked up, his bloodshot eyes swimming with tears. "I'll do better. For you and Michael, for the baby." Eleanor nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She'd heard these promises before. "I mean it this time," William insisted, as if reading her thoughts. "I'll find work, proper work." "Mr. Hawkins will need help when he returns," Eleanor suggested carefully. "His grandson is ill, and I don't need charity from Hawkins," William snapped, his mood shifting like quicksilver. He struggled to his feet. "And I don't need that stranger looking down on me either." "No one is looking down on you, William. I've seen how people talk, how they whisper." His voice rose. "Poor Eleanor Parker, saddled with a cripple who can't provide." "That's not true," Eleanor protested, though she knew some did say such things. William wasn't listening. "I'll show them, I'll show everyone." He limped toward their bedroom. "I just need rest. Tomorrow will be different." Eleanor remained by the window long after William's snores filled the small house. Tomorrow wouldn't be different. It never was. The next morning, Eleanor rose before dawn, leaving a note for William saying she'd gone to work. With Michael still yawning sleepily beside her, she made her way to the livery in the gray light of early morning. Xavier was already there, fork in hand as he pitched fresh hay into the stalls. He nodded in greeting. "Didn't expect you quite so early," he remarked. Eleanor rolled up her sleeves. "Thought I'd get a head start." They worked in companionable silence as the sun crept above the horizon, painting the stable with golden light. Michael, now fully awake, happily took on the task of filling water buckets. "He's a good worker," Xavier commented, watching Michael carefully carry water to the horse troughs. "Takes after his mother, I'd wager." Eleanor smiled slightly. "He's always been eager to help. Good quality in a boy." Xavier leaned on his pitchfork. "Mrs. Parker, Eleanor, please," she interrupted. "If I'm to call you Xavier," he nodded. "Eleanor, then. I was wondering if you'd consider taking on an additional task. The tack room needs organizing, and there's mending to be done on some of the saddles and bridles. I'd pay extra." The offer was clearly meant to ease her burden without wounding her pride. Eleanor appreciated the delicacy. "I'd be happy to," she agreed. As the morning progressed, more of the town's residents came by the livery, some to check on their horses, others clearly curious about the new man in town. Eleanor kept her head down, focusing on her work, but she couldn't help noticing how differently people treated Xavier compared to her. Men nodded respectfully. Women smiled a bit too brightly. Even Reverend Thompson stopped by, engaging Xavier in earnest conversation while pointedly ignoring Eleanor's presence. "Seems you've made an impression on the town," Eleanor observed after the Reverend left. Xavier shrugged. "People are always curious about newcomers. It'll pass." "Not all newcomers get the Reverend's personal welcome," she countered. A smile tugged at Xavier's mouth. "He wanted to make sure my soul wasn't in peril and to hint broadly about the vacant land for sale. The Wilkins place, among others. Seems Broken Ridge is eager for new blood and new money." Xavier studied her face. "How long have you lived here?" 3 years. Eleanor brushed hay from her skirt. "Since I married William." Xavier nodded but didn't press further. Instead, he said, "I've got business in town." "Will you be all right here for an hour or so?" "Of course," Eleanor assured him. After Xavier left, Eleanor tackled the tack room. Years of neglect had left it in disarray, with saddles, bridles, and tools scattered haphazardly. She sorted methodically, creating order from chaos while Michael napped on a clean pile of straw. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the stable door open. William's voice startled her. "So this is where you've been hiding." Eleanor turned to find her husband standing in the tack room doorway, his expression unreadable. He was sober, at least his eyes clear, his stance steady. "Not hiding," she corrected gently. "Working as I told you." William's gaze swept the room, noting the organized shelves and the neat pile of tack needing repair. "Seems like women's work now." "It's paid work," Eleanor replied, keeping her voice even. "That's what matters." William limped into the room, examining a saddle she'd just oiled. "I spoke to Jenkins this morning. There's work at the sawmill. They need men to load timber." Hope fluttered in Eleanor's chest. "That's wonderful, William. When do you start?" "Monday." He straightened, wincing slightly as his bad leg protested. "I came to tell you that you don't need to be doing this anymore. I'll provide for my family." Eleanor wanted desperately to believe him. "The extra money would help us get ahead," she suggested carefully. "At least until the baby comes." William's jaw tightened. "A man provides for his wife, not the other way around. I won't have the town saying William Parker lets his pregnant wife work while he sits idle." "No one is saying that," Eleanor lied. "Aren't they?" William's voice rose. "I've seen the looks, heard the whispers." His gaze fell on Michael, still sleeping. "Even my son thinks I'm worthless." "That's not true," Eleanor protested. "Michael adores you." "When was the last time he looked at me the way he looks at that cowboy?" William demanded. "I saw you all yesterday playing happy family while I was gone." The accusation stung. "Mr. Grant has been kind to us, nothing more." "He's been feeding my family because I couldn't," William said bitterly. "Don't think I haven't heard about that too." Eleanor took a steadying breath. "William, please, this isn't about your pride. It's about keeping food on the table and a roof over our heads." "My pride is all I have left." William's shout woke Michael, who sat up, eyes wide with fear. The sight of his son's fear seemed to shock William back to himself. He ran a hand through his hair, visibly struggling for control. "I'm taking Michael home," he said finally, his voice quieter. "You finish your work here, but after today you're done. I'll handle things from now on." Before Eleanor could respond, William had gathered a confused Michael and limped out of the stable. Eleanor sank onto a wooden stool, one hand pressed to her mouth to hold back a sob. She was still sitting there when Xavier returned. One look at her face told him something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, setting down the packages he carried. Eleanor quickly wiped her eyes. "My husband came by. He's found work at the sawmill." Xavier studied her carefully. "That's good news, isn't it?" "Yes," Eleanor said, trying to sound convincing. "Very good news." "But he doesn't want you working here anymore," Xavier guessed. Eleanor nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "After today, I can't come back." Xavier was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "I understand. A man has his pride." "Pride won't feed my children," Eleanor said softly. "No, it won't." Xavier reached into his pocket and withdrew an envelope. "Which is why I want you to have this." Eleanor looked at the envelope suspiciously. What is it? Payment. For organizing the tack room and for the mending work I'd like you to take home and complete. Eleanor hesitated. I haven't finished the organizing, let alone started the mending. I'm paying in advance, Xavier said simply. I trust you'll finish the work. It was charity disguised as employment, but Eleanor couldn't bring herself to refuse. She took the envelope with murmured thanks. I should finish the tack room before I go, she said, rising from the stool. Xavier nodded. I'll help. 4 hands make quicker work than 2. They worked side by side for the remainder of the afternoon, speaking little but moving in unconscious harmony. Eleanor found herself painfully aware of Xavier's presence, the clean scent of him, the careful strength in his movements, the way his eyes crinkled when something amused him. As the sun began to set, they stood back to admire the transformed tack room. Old Hawkins won't recognize the place, Xavier remarked. It was satisfying work, Eleanor admitted. I've always liked creating order from chaos, Xavier smiled. A valuable skill in this disorderly world. Eleanor gathered her shawl, suddenly reluctant to leave. I should get home. Of course. Xavier collected several bridles and a small saddle that needed mending. For your work at home, he explained, placing them in a burlap sack. Their fingers brushed as she took the sack, sending an unexpected warmth up Eleanor's arm. She pulled away quickly, disconcerted. Thank you for everything, she said formally. Xavier's gray eyes held hers for a long moment. If you need anything at all, you know where to find me. The simple offer, spoken without pity or judgment, nearly undid her composure. Eleanor nodded once and hurried away before her emotions betrayed her. At home, she found William and Michael playing checkers at the kitchen table. The sight was so reminiscent of happier times that Eleanor's heart squeezed painfully in her chest. Mama, Michael exclaimed. Papa's teaching me strategy. Is he now? Eleanor hung her shawl on its hook, carefully setting the sack of mending in a corner. Who's winning? Papa is, but I almost got him once. William looked up, his expression guarded. There's stew on the stove. I traded Jenkins some chopped wood for the meat. Eleanor blinked in surprise. You chopped wood? With your leg? My leg's not as bad as I make it out to be, William interrupted, a flush rising on his cheeks. Not when I'm sober anyway. The admission hung in the air between them, an acknowledgement of his failings that William had never voiced before. Thank you, Eleanor said simply, moving to the stove. The stew was simple, just beef, potatoes, and carrots, but it smelled heavenly. As they ate, William outlined his plans. The sawmill job paid weekly. It would be hard work, but the foreman had assured him they could accommodate his bad leg by assigning him to the sorting area rather than the loading dock. It's less pay, William admitted, but it's steady. And there's talk the railroad might hire more men come summer. Eleanor nodded encouragingly, afraid to hope yet unable to stop herself. How many times had William started well, only to slide back into old habits? After dinner, William took Michael for his bath while Eleanor unpacked the mending from the livery. She was examining the stitching on a bridle when William returned. What's that? He asked, nodding toward the leather pieces. Mending work, Eleanor explained, from the livery. I can do it here at home. William frowned. I told you it's just until you get your first wages, Eleanor interrupted, and I can do it in the evenings after my regular chores are done. William looked like he wanted to argue, but after a moment he sighed. All right. But only until my first payday. Eleanor nodded, relief washing through her. The money in the envelope Xavier had given her, combined with what she'd earned from the mending, would keep them fed until William's wages came in if he stayed sober long enough to earn them. The next week passed in a strange new rhythm. William rose early each morning and went to the sawmill, returning tired but sober. Eleanor cared for Michael, tended their small garden, and worked on the mending from the livery. In the evenings, they sat together as a family, sometimes playing games, sometimes just talking softly as Michael dozed by the fire. It was the life Eleanor had once dreamed of, yet she found herself thinking of Xavier Grant more often than she should, wondering what he was doing. if he'd found someone else to help at the livery, if he was still considering buying land near Broken Ridge. She hadn't seen him since that last day at the stable, though Michael reported excitedly that he'd spotted the cowboy talking to the banker on Main Street. Eleanor deliberately avoided the livery when she went to town for supplies, telling herself it was to respect William's wishes. On Saturday, William came home with his first pay envelope. His eyes shone with a pride Eleanor hadn't seen in years as he handed it to her. "It's all there," he said. "Every penny." Eleanor opened the envelope and counted the money, $5.35. Not a fortune, but enough to buy proper groceries and maybe even put a little aside for the baby's needs. "I'm proud of you," she said, meaning it. William ducked his head, embarrassed by the praise. "I was thinking we could all go to town tomorrow after church. Buy some supplies, maybe have dinner at the hotel restaurant." The hotel restaurant was an extravagance they couldn't afford, but Eleanor didn't have the heart to dampen William's enthusiasm. "That sounds lovely." Sunday dawned clear and warm. For the first time in months, Eleanor wore her church dress without shame, knowing she had a husband beside her who was sober and employed. The townsfolk noticed the change. Eleanor saw the speculative glances, heard the whispered comments. After the service, Reverend Thompson even stopped to speak with them, his manner notably warmer than it had been in recent months. "William, Eleanor, good to see you both," he said, shaking William's hand. "I understand congratulations are in order for your new position at the sawmill." William straightened, pride evident in his posture. "Yes, sir, it's good, honest work." "Indeed it is," the Reverend agreed, "and your timing is fortunate. I hear the railroad is considering a spur line through Broken Ridge. There should be plenty of work for industrious men." As they spoke, Eleanor's attention was drawn to a figure across the churchyard, Xavier Grant, deep in conversation with Mr. Cartwright, the banker. Xavier was dressed in a clean black suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, his gray eyes finding hers across the distance. Eleanor quickly looked away, her cheeks warming. When she glanced back, Xavier had tipped his hat in subtle acknowledgement before returning his attention to the banker. "That's Grant, isn't it?" William asked, following her gaze. "The man you worked for," Eleanor nodded, watching as William's expression darkened slightly. "I heard he's buying the old Wilkins place," William said. "Planning to raise horses, according to Jenkins." "He mentioned he was looking at property," Eleanor said carefully. William was silent for a moment, then said abruptly, "We should get to the store before it closes for Sunday." As they walked away, Eleanor felt Xavier's eyes following them but didn't look back. MacGregor's general store was busy with after-church shoppers, but Mr. MacGregor himself came forward when they entered. "William, Eleanor," he greeted them with newfound warmth. "What can I help you with today?" "We need supplies," William said, handing the list Eleanor had prepared to the shopkeeper. "And we'll be paying cash." The slight emphasis on the last word wasn't lost on MacGregor, who nodded respectfully. "I'll gather these right away." As MacGregor moved around the store collecting their items, Eleanor browsed the fabric section, fingering a bolt of soft blue cotton. With the baby coming in just 2 months, she needed to sew some gowns and blankets. "You should get some," William said, coming up beside her. "For the baby." Eleanor looked at him in surprise. "It's $2 a yard, William. We can't get 3 yards, he interrupted. "And whatever else you need for the baby's things." Eleanor hesitated, torn between practicality and the desire to provide something nice for their child. "Are you sure?" William nodded firmly. "I want this baby to have new things, not just hand-me-downs from Michael." Eleanor added the fabric and sewing notions to their order, her heart lighter than it had been in months. When the total came to almost $4, William paid without flinching, even adding a small sack of peppermint drops for Michael. Outside the store, William suggested they visit the hotel restaurant for dinner as planned, but Eleanor shook her head. "Let's save that for a special occasion," she suggested. I can cook us a proper Sunday dinner at home with what we've bought. William looked disappointed but nodded in agreement. Next payday then. As they turned toward home, a commotion down the street caught their attention. A group of men had gathered outside the saloon, their voices raised in anger. At the center stood Xavier Grant, his expression calm despite the hostile crowd surrounding him. "What's happening?" Eleanor asked a woman passing by. "That new fellow, Grant, caught Jenkins cheating at cards last night," the woman explained eagerly. "Called him out in front of everyone. Now Jenkins and his friends are looking for trouble." William tensed beside her. "Take Michael home," he said, handing her the packages. "William, don't. I'll be right behind you," he promised. "I just want to see what's happening." Eleanor hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Be careful." She hurried Michael away, glancing back to see William limping toward the gathering crowd. Worry gnawed at her as she walked home, but she forced herself to focus on unpacking their purchases and starting dinner. An hour passed with no sign of William. Eleanor had just decided to go looking for him when the door opened. William entered, followed by Xavier Grant. Eleanor froze, wooden spoon in hand, as the two men stood awkwardly in her kitchen. Mr. Grant stepped in when Jenkins and his boys decided to get rough, William explained, his voice strained. "Thought I should thank him properly?" Xavier removed his hat. "No thanks necessary, Mr. Parker. 5 against 1 weren't fair odds, even if the one was me." Eleanor noticed a bruise forming on William's cheekbone and a split in Xavier's lip. "You were fighting?" she asked, dismayed. "Your husband fights well for a man with a bad leg," Xavier said, a note of respect in his voice. "Has a mean right hook." William's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Not as mean as your left." The tension in the room shifted subtly. Eleanor set down her spoon. "You're both hurt. Sit down and let me tend to those cuts." Neither man argued as Eleanor fetched her small medicine box. She cleaned William's scraped knuckles and put a cold cloth on his bruised cheek, then turned to Xavier. His split lip wasn't serious, but as she dabbed at it with a damp cloth, Eleanor was acutely aware of his gray eyes watching her face, of the clean scent of him mixed with the metallic tang of blood. "Thank you," Xavier said softly when she finished. Eleanor nodded, stepping back quickly. "It's the least I can do, considering you helped my husband." William cleared his throat. "I've invited Mr. Grant to stay for dinner if that's all right with you." The request surprised Eleanor, but she nodded. "Of course, there's plenty." Xavier looked like he might refuse, but after a glance at William's face, he nodded. "That's mighty kind of you both." Eleanor returned to her cooking, listening with half an ear as the men talked. William explained about his new job at the sawmill while Xavier shared his plans for the Wilkins property, which he'd officially purchased the day before. "It's good grazing land," Xavier was saying, "and the house is solid, though it needs work. I'm thinking of raising horses good stock for breeding and training." "Ambitious plan for one man," William commented. Xavier nodded. "I'll hire help once I'm established. For now, I can manage the essential work myself." The conversation continued through dinner, with Michael hanging on Xavier's every word about horses and ranching. Eleanor spoke little, watching the strange dynamic between the two men. There was wariness on both sides, but also a grudging respect that hadn't been there before. After dinner, William surprised her again by suggesting that Xavier show Michael the proper way to whittle, something the boy had been begging to learn. As the three males settled by the fire with small pieces of wood and William's pocketknife, Eleanor cleared the table, her mind whirling with confusion. What had happened between William and Xavier to cause this change? And why did Xavier's presence in her home make her feel so unsettled? When it was time for Michael's bed, Xavier rose to leave. "Thank you for your hospitality," he said formally, "and for tending my wounds, Mrs. Parker." "Eleanor," she corrected automatically, then flushed when William glanced at her. Xavier nodded. "Eleanor, then." He turned to William. "I meant what I said about needing help with the fencing. The offer stands if you're interested in Sunday work." William hesitated, then nodded. "I'll think on it." After Xavier left, Eleanor waited for William to explain, but he busied himself helping Michael prepare for bed. It wasn't until they were alone in their bedroom that she finally asked, "What happened today, William? With Mr. Grant and Jenkins?" William sighed, sitting heavily on the edge of their bed. Jenkins and his friends cornered Grant behind the saloon. Said he'd insulted Jenkins's honor by calling him a cheat. William shook his head. It was 5 against 1 and they weren't fighting fair. "So you stepped in," Eleanor said softly. "I know what it's like to have men like Jenkins look down on you," William replied, his voice bitter. "To be the one they think they can push around." Eleanor sat beside him, taking his hand in hers. "That was brave of you," William shrugged uncomfortably. "Grant would have managed without me. Man can handle himself in a fight." He paused. "Afterward, he didn't talk down to me like I was some charity case, treated me like a man who'd done him a good turn, that's all." Another pause. "Said he could use help with fencing his new property, offered fair wages for Sunday work." "Are you going to accept?" Eleanor asked carefully. William ran a hand through his hair. "The extra money would help, and it's honest work." He looked at her, a question in his eyes. "Would it bother you, me working for him?" Eleanor squeezed his hand. "I think it's a good opportunity." William nodded slowly. "Maybe it is." He stretched out on the bed, wincing as his bruised body protested. "We'll see." Eleanor extinguished the lamp and lay beside him in the darkness, her thoughts in turmoil. The day had brought so many changes, William sober and working, their pantry stocked with food, and Xavier Grant sitting at their table like an old friend rather than a stranger. It felt like the beginning of something, though whether good or bad, Eleanor couldn't say. The following weeks brought more changes to the Parker household. William continued working at the sawmill during the week and began helping Xavier with fencing on Sundays. The extra income allowed them to gradually replace items they'd sold during the hard times: a proper chair for the kitchen, new boots for Michael, fabric for baby clothes. More importantly, William remained sober. There were moments when Eleanor saw him eyeing the saloon as they passed, his expression taut with longing, but each time he turned away, choosing his family over the bottle. It wasn't easy. Some nights he was irritable, his hands shaking slightly as he fought the craving, but he held firm. Eleanor finished the mending for the livery and delivered it to Mr. Hawkins, who had returned from his daughter's home. The old man paid her fairly and hinted that there might be more work in the future if she was interested. Eleanor accepted gratefully, relieved that William didn't object when she told him. As her pregnancy advanced, Eleanor found herself increasingly uncomfortable in the summer heat. Her ankles swelled, her back ached constantly, and sleep became elusive. Dr. Wilson, making his monthly visit to Broken Ridge, examined her and pronounced both mother and baby healthy, but advised rest in the final weeks before the birth. "Easier said than done," Eleanor murmured as she hung laundry one scorching July morning. Michael was helping, handing her wet clothes from the basket, his small face serious with concentration. "Mama, when will the baby come?" he asked, struggling with a heavy wet sheet. "Soon," Eleanor replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Another month or so." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "Papa says it might be a girl, but I want a brother." Eleanor smiled. "We don't get to choose, sweetheart, but either way you'll be a wonderful big brother." A horse's whinny drew their attention to the road, where Xavier Grant was approaching on midnight. The stallion gleamed in the sunlight, his black coat a stark contrast to the dusty landscape. Xavier reined in at their fence. "Morning, Eleanor." "Hello, Michael." Michael waved enthusiastically. "Mr. Grant, did you bring Pepper?" Xavier smiled. "Not today. He's getting new shoes at the blacksmith's." Pepper was a gentle pinto pony that Xavier was training. He'd taken to bringing the horse when he came to collect William for Sunday work, letting Michael sit on the pony's back and learn basic riding skills. It was the highlight of Michael's week. "William's already gone to the sawmill," Eleanor said, wondering why Xavier had come on a Thursday. "I know, I'm actually here to see you." Xavier dismounted, tying Midnight to the fence post. Got a business proposition if you're willing to hear it. Eleanor gestured toward the shade of the porch. Of course. Would you like some coffee? That would be welcome. Inside the small house, Eleanor poured coffee while Michael went to find the sugar cookies she'd baked the previous day. Xavier removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair as he sat at the kitchen table. How's the fencing coming along? Eleanor asked, setting a cup before him, almost done thanks to William's help. Xavier took a sip of coffee. He's a hard worker when he sets his mind to it. Eleanor nodded, pleased by the praise of her husband. What's this proposition you mentioned? Xavier leaned forward. I'm finishing work on the house at my place. It needs curtains, cushions, that sort of thing to make it livable. I was hoping you might be willing to sew them for me. I'd provide all the materials and pay for your work, of course. Eleanor considered the offer. The money would be welcome, especially with the baby coming, and sewing was work she could do at home, even in the later stages of pregnancy. I'd be happy to, she agreed. When would you need them? No hurry. I've lived in bunkhouses and tents most of my life. I can manage without curtains a while longer. Xavier smiled. But I'd like to have the place properly finished before winter sets in. They discussed fabric choices and measurements, Xavier making notes in a small book he carried. Michael returned with the cookies and insisted on showing Xavier his new wooden horse, carved by William during the evenings. Your pa's getting good with a knife, Xavier observed, examining the simple but well-proportioned carving. He's making a whole farm, Michael said proudly. For me and the baby to play with. When it was time for Xavier to leave, he hesitated on the porch. There's one more thing, Eleanor. The house at my place has a good-sized garden plot that's gone to seed. I noticed your garden here is doing well despite the drought. Eleanor nodded. I've always had a knack for growing things. I was wondering if you'd be willing to advise me on getting it planted for a fall harvest. I can pay, no need to pay for gardening advice, Eleanor interrupted. I'm happy to help. Xavier studied her face. William mentioned your time's getting close with the baby. I don't want to impose. It's no imposition, Eleanor assured him. Michael and I could come out next week to look at your garden, if William doesn't mind, she added quickly. I already spoke to him about it at work on Sunday, Xavier said. He thought it was a good idea. Eleanor nodded, surprised but pleased by William's continued openness regarding Xavier. Then we'll come. Tuesday perhaps? Tuesday is perfect. Xavier settled his hat back on his head. I'll send the wagon for you. The ride's too rough for a woman in your condition to manage on horseback. After Xavier left, Eleanor found herself humming as she finished the laundry. The prospect of the sewing work and the garden planning gave her a sense of purpose beyond the daily household chores. And if she was honest with herself, the thought of seeing Xavier's new home intrigued her. When William returned from work that evening, Eleanor told him about Xavier's visit. He said he'd already discussed it with you, she said, watching William's face for any sign of disapproval. William nodded, washing trail dust from his hands at the kitchen basin. Grant mentioned it on Sunday. Seems he can build a house but doesn't know beans about making it a home. He dried his hands on a towel. The extra money will help with the baby coming. Eleanor studied her husband. In the weeks since he'd stopped drinking, William had changed not just in his sobriety but in his bearing. He stood straighter, spoke more confidently. The work at the sawmill had strengthened his body, and the purpose it gave him had strengthened his spirit. You don't mind me going out to his place? She asked. William shrugged. Why would I? It's decent work and Grant's been fair with me. He paused. Besides, the man lives like he's still on a cattle drive. Place could use a woman's touch. The casual remark brought an unexpected pang to Eleanor's heart. Was that how Xavier saw her involvement, simply a woman's touch for his home? And why should that bother her? Tuesday dawned clear and hot. By mid-morning, a wagon arrived at the Parker house, driven by a sandy-haired boy of about 16. Mrs. Parker, I'm Ned Wilson. Mr. Grant sent me to fetch you and your boy. Eleanor and Michael climbed aboard, settling on the wooden seat beside Ned. The boy handled the team competently as they left town, heading north toward the foothills where the old Wilkins place lay. "How long have you worked for Mr. Grant?" Eleanor asked as they traveled. "Just a few weeks, madam. He hired me and my pa to help with the building repairs," Ned replied. "Pa's working on the barn roof today. Do you live in town?" Eleanor didn't recall seeing the boy before. Ned shook his head. "Out by Miller's Creek. Pa does carpentry work wherever he can get it." The wagon rumbled over the uneven road, jostling its passengers. Eleanor braced herself with one hand on the seat and the other protectively over her swollen belly. Michael bounced beside her, his expression alight with excitement at the adventure. After nearly an hour, they crested a rise, and Eleanor caught her first glimpse of Xavier's property spread out before them. The house stood on a gentle slope, a solid two-story structure of weathered wood. Beyond it, a large barn and several smaller outbuildings clustered near a creek that wound through the property. Green pastures stretched in every direction, dotted with stands of cottonwood and pine. "It's beautiful," Eleanor murmured. Ned nodded. "Best water rights in the county, according to my pa. That's why Mr. Grant wanted it, even though the buildings needed work." As they approached the house, Eleanor could see evidence of the renovations Xavier had mentioned. Fresh lumber gleamed among the weathered boards of the porch, and new glass sparkled in several windows. Xavier emerged from the barn as they pulled up, wiping his hands on a cloth. He wore no coat or vest in the summer heat, just a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms tanned and muscled from outdoor work. "You made good time, Ned," he called, approaching the wagon. "Mrs. Parker, Michael, welcome to Willow Creek Ranch." "Is that what you're calling it?" Eleanor asked as Xavier helped her down from the wagon. Seemed fitting with all the willows along the creek. Xavier turned to Michael, who was staring wide-eyed at the property. "Would you like to see the horses, young man? Pepper's been asking about you." Michael nodded eagerly. "Can I, Mama?" "Stay where Mr. Grant can see you," Eleanor cautioned. Xavier glanced at Ned. "Show Michael the new foal, would you? Then you can help your father with the barn roof." As Ned led an excited Michael toward the corral, Xavier turned to Eleanor. "I thought we'd start with the house, so you can see what needs to be done with the curtains and such. Then I can show you the garden plot." Eleanor followed him up the porch steps and into the house. The front door opened directly into a large room that served as both parlor and dining area. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, while windows on two sides let in ample light. The furnishings were sparse but solid: a table with 6 chairs, a sofa and 2 armchairs grouped near the fireplace, and a cabinet against one wall. "It's a good house," Eleanor said, noting the sturdy construction despite years of neglect. "Solidly built." "The Wilkins family knew what they were doing," Xavier agreed. "I've had to replace some rotted boards and fix the roof, but the bones are sound." He showed her through the rest of the first floor a spacious kitchen with a new cast iron stove, a small study that Xavier was using as his office, and a bedroom that he explained was intended for guests. "The stairs lead to 3 more bedrooms," he said, gesturing upward. "But I don't want to make you climb in your condition." Eleanor nodded gratefully. The wagon ride had tired her more than she wanted to admit, and the thought of stairs was daunting. "This is a lot of house for one man," she observed. Something flickered in Xavier's eyes. "I've spent most of my life in cramped quarters. Thought I'd try the opposite for a change." He cleared his throat. "Coffee or something cool to drink? It's hot today." "Water would be welcome," Eleanor admitted. In the kitchen, Xavier poured water from a pitcher into a glass and handed it to her. Eleanor drank gratefully, suddenly aware of how domestic the moment felt, the two of them standing in his kitchen, her assessing his home as if. She cut the thought off sharply. "Let's measure for those curtains," she suggested. They spent the next hour going from room to room, Eleanor making notes on the window sizes and discussing fabric options. Xavier had definite opinions on colors, preferring blues and greens to reds or yellows, but deferred to her judgment on patterns and styles. "Nothing fancy," he insisted. Just clean and simple. By the time they finished, Eleanor had a comprehensive list of what was needed. I'll draw up some designs for you to approve, she said as they returned to the kitchen. Then you can purchase the fabric in town, or I can if you prefer. I'd appreciate if you would, Xavier said. I wouldn't know calico from muslin. Eleanor smiled at his candid admission. Most men wouldn't. Most men have wives to handle such things, Xavier replied, then looked away quickly, as if regretting the comment. An awkward silence fell between them, broken when the back door opened and Michael burst in, his face alight with excitement. Mama, I saw the foal, she's beautiful, and Mr. Ned let me give her an apple, and she has a white star on her forehead. Eleanor laughed at his enthusiasm. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Xavier smiled at the boy's excitement. Ned tells me you have a good eye for horses, Michael. That's a useful skill. Michael beamed at the praise. Papa says I might get my own pony someday when I'm bigger. A worthy goal, Xavier agreed. Would you like to see the garden now, Eleanor? It's just behind the house. The garden plot was larger than Eleanor had expected, nearly a quarter-acre of land that had once been carefully tended, but was now overgrown with weeds and volunteer plants. It's a mess, Xavier admitted, surveying the tangled growth, but the soil is good, rich and dark. Eleanor nodded, already mentally planning what could be planted for a fall harvest. Potatoes would do well here, and turnips, carrots, late cabbages, maybe even some winter squash if we plant soon. Xavier asked quietly. Eleanor flushed. I meant you, of course. Xavier studied her face for a moment, then turned away, pointing toward a small structure at the edge of the garden. There's a tool shed with everything you'd need for gardening. And the creek provides plenty of water, even in summer. They walked the perimeter of the garden, Eleanor making suggestions while Michael trailed behind them, occasionally stopping to examine an interesting rock or insect. The boy's presence was a constant reminder to Eleanor of the boundaries between her and Xavier, boundaries that sometimes felt blurred in their easy conversations and shared interests. By early afternoon, Eleanor was visibly tiring. Xavier noticed her flagging energy and suggested they return to the house for a meal before heading back to town. It's nothing fancy, he warned as he set bread, cheese, and cold chicken on the kitchen table. But it'll keep body and soul together. The simple meal was surprisingly good. Xavier had coffee brewing on the stove and produced a jar of preserves that he admitted had been a gift from the Reverend's wife. She's been very attentive since I moved in, he said with a wry smile. The Reverend's wife is attentive to every unmarried man of means who comes to Broken Ridge, Eleanor remarked. I'm sure she's already planning which eligible young woman would make you the best wife. Xavier's expression turned serious. She's wasting her time. I'm not looking for a match. No. Eleanor asked, surprising herself with the question. Xavier was silent for a moment. I was married once, a long time ago. The revelation startled Eleanor. I didn't know, not many do. Xavier poured more coffee. Her name was Marlena. We were both young, barely 20. She died of fever less than a year after our wedding. I'm sorry, Eleanor said softly. Xavier nodded, his expression distant. It was a lifetime ago. I've been on the move ever since, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. Until now, Eleanor observed. Until now, Xavier agreed, his gray eyes meeting hers. The moment stretched between them, filled with things unsaid. Then Michael dropped his fork with a clatter, breaking the tension. Can I see the horses again before we go? He asked, oblivious to the adult undercurrents. Xavier smiled at the boy. Of course, and maybe next time you visit, I'll teach you how to groom them properly. The promise of a next visit brightened Michael's face. Eleanor said nothing, but as they prepared to leave, she found herself already anticipating returning to Willow Creek Ranch, a thought that brought both pleasure and disquiet. The wagon ride back to town was quieter, Michael dozing against Eleanor's side after the excitement of the day. As they approached the outskirts of Broken Ridge, Eleanor roused him gently. We're almost home, sweetheart. Time to wake up. Michael rubbed his eyes sleepily. Can we go back to Mr. Grant's ranch tomorrow? Not tomorrow, Eleanor said, smiling at his eagerness. But soon, perhaps. When the fabric comes for the curtains. At home, Eleanor found a note from William saying he would be working late at the sawmill. A special order had come in, and the foreman was paying extra for the overtime. Eleanor prepared a simple dinner, her mind drifting repeatedly to the day at Willow Creek Ranch, the spacious house, the garden with its rich soil, and Xavier's quiet revelation about his long-ago marriage. Why had he told her that? And why did it matter so much to her? William returned after Michael was in bed, tired but pleased with the extra pay. He listened attentively as Eleanor described the ranch and the work she'd agreed to do. Grant's building something substantial out there, William commented as they prepared for bed, man with his eyes on the future. It seems that way, Eleanor agreed. William was quiet for a moment, then said, Jenkins was talking at the mill today. Says Grant was a cavalry scout during the war, then a Texas Ranger for a spell after that. Man's led an interesting life. Eleanor thought of the strength in Xavier's hands, the watchful alertness in his gray eyes. I can believe it. Jenkins also says Grant's got money more than he lets on. Says he paid cash for the Wilkins place and has been buying prime breeding stock from as far away as Kentucky. William turned to look at her in the lamplight. Reckon that's why all the mamas in town are throwing their daughters at him. Eleanor smoothed the quilt across their bed. He's not interested. He told me so himself. William raised an eyebrow. Did he now? And what else did he tell you? There was no accusation in William's voice, just curiosity, but Eleanor felt herself flush. That he was married once long ago, his wife died of fever. William nodded slowly. Explains a few things about the man. What do you mean? The way he keeps to himself. The way he watches people like he's measuring everyone against some standard only he knows. William extinguished the lamp. Man who's lost everything once keeps his guard up. Eleanor lay in the darkness, considering William's words. Xavier did keep his guard up with everyone except perhaps her and Michael. With them, he showed a different side of himself, gentler, more open. The thought followed her into sleep, where she dreamed of willows bending over clear water and a house filled with light. The next 2 weeks were filled with preparations for the baby. Dr. Wilson predicted an early August birth, and Eleanor wanted everything ready well in advance. She sewed baby gowns, prepared a cradle that had been Michael's, and put the final touches on the curtains and cushions for Xavier's ranch. William continued working both at the sawmill and at Willow Creek Ranch on Sundays. He came home from these days with Xavier tired but satisfied, often bringing news of the ranch's progress, a new corral completed, a well dug closer to the house, plans for expanding the stable. Grant's talking about hiring a full-time ranch hand, William mentioned one Sunday evening. Says he's getting too old to do all the work himself. Eleanor looked up from her mending. He can't be that old, 40 perhaps? 38, William corrected. But he says he's felt every one of those years lately. He hesitated. He asked if I'd be interested in the position. Eleanor's hands stilled. At the ranch, full-time, William nodded. Says he needs someone who knows horses and isn't afraid of hard work. Pays better than the sawmill, and there's a small house for the foreman on the property. The foreman, Eleanor repeated, surprised. He's offering you a foreman position, William flushed with pride. Says I've got a good head for planning and an eye for detail. Things he needs in someone overseeing the daily operations. Eleanor set aside her mending, studying her husband's face. What did you tell him? Said I'd discuss it with my wife. William met her gaze. It would mean living on the ranch, Ellie, away from town. Away from the saloon, he added quietly. The implication was clear, away from temptation. Away from the memories of his failures. A fresh start. Do you want to accept? Eleanor asked. William ran a hand through his hair. Part of me does. It's good work, work I'd be proud of. And the house, it's small but solid. 2 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, room for a garden. He paused. But it would mean working for Grant, living on his land. Eleanor understood the hesitation. For a man rebuilding his pride, being beholden to another man, especially one as self-sufficient as Xavier, was complicated. "You've been working for him already," she pointed out gently. "That's different. Sunday work is extra. This would be—" William struggled for the words. "This would be putting our future in his hands." Eleanor reached for her husband's hand. "No, it would be accepting an opportunity that's good for our family. The man offering it doesn't change the value of the opportunity." William squeezed her hand, gratitude in his eyes. "You always could see things clearer than me, Ellie. When will you need to give him an answer?" "Soon. He's got other men interested if I decline." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps we should see this foreman's house before deciding. I could come with you next Sunday." William agreed, but their plans were disrupted when Eleanor woke in the early hours of Thursday morning, her nightgown soaked with fluid, her body gripped by unmistakable pains. "The baby," she gasped, shaking William awake. "It's coming early." William was instantly alert, years of dormant competence resurfacing as he helped Eleanor to a chair and hurried to wake Michael. "I'm taking you to the doctor," he said, returning with a sleepy but wide-eyed Michael. "Can you walk, or should I carry you?" "I can walk," Eleanor insisted, though each contraction made her doubt her own words. "But Dr. Wilson isn't in town until next week. You'll have to fetch Mrs. Simmons." Mrs. Simmons was the town's midwife, a capable woman who had delivered most of Broken Ridge's children over the past 20 years. William nodded, helping Eleanor to their bed before kneeling beside Michael. "I need you to be brave, son. Stay with your mother while I get Mrs. Simmons. Can you do that?" Michael nodded solemnly. "Yes, Papa." William pressed a kiss to Eleanor's damp forehead. "I'll be back as quick as I can." After he left, Eleanor tried to focus on her breathing as the contractions intensified. Michael sat beside the bed, his small face solemn with worry. "Are you going to be all right, Mama?" he asked when she gasped with a particularly strong pain. "Yes, sweetheart," Eleanor managed. "This is just how babies come into the world. It hurts, but it's a good kind of hurt." Michael didn't look convinced, but he held her hand faithfully through each contraction, his presence a comfort in the growing pain. It seemed an eternity before William returned with Mrs. Simmons, a stout, gray-haired woman who took charge immediately. "This little one's in a hurry," she announced after examining Eleanor. "William, boil water and find clean towels. Michael, you come with me. You can help by bringing your mama cool cloths for her forehead." The next hours passed in a blur of pain for Eleanor. The early morning light strengthened into full day as she labored, Mrs. Simmons's calm voice guiding her through each contraction. William remained nearby, pale but steady, following the midwife's instructions without question. Shortly after noon, with a final push and a cry that seemed torn from her very soul, Eleanor delivered a daughter small but perfect, with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the world with impressive volume. "A beautiful girl," Mrs. Simmons declared, cleaning and swaddling the infant before placing her in Eleanor's trembling arms. "Small but strong." Eleanor gazed down at her daughter's face, tears of exhaustion and joy mingling on her cheeks. "She's perfect," she whispered. William sat on the edge of the bed, his expression a mixture of awe and tenderness as he touched the baby's tiny hand. "She looks like you," he said softly. Mrs. Simmons called Michael in to meet his sister. The boy approached cautiously, his eyes wide as he stared at the small bundle in his mother's arms. "She's so little," he whispered, "but she'll grow," Eleanor assured him, "and she'll need her big brother to look after her." "What will you name her?" Mrs. Simmons asked as she tidied the room. Eleanor looked at William questioningly. They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one. "Sarah," William said after a moment, "after your mother." Eleanor's eyes filled with fresh tears at the thoughtful gesture. "Sarah Elizabeth Parker," she agreed, looking down at her daughter's peaceful face. Mrs. Simmons stayed until evening, ensuring that both mother and baby were resting comfortably before taking her leave. She promised to return the next day and left strict instructions for Eleanor to remain in bed for at least 3 days. "The birth was quick but hard on your body," she warned. You need to regain your strength. After she left, William sat beside Eleanor, watching as she nursed Sarah. I'll stay home tomorrow, he said. The foreman will understand. Eleanor shook her head. We need the money more than ever now. Mrs. Simmons will check on us and Michael is a good helper. William looked doubtful. Are you sure? I'm sure. Eleanor smiled tiredly. We've managed harder things. The next morning, William left reluctantly for the sawmill, but not before arranging for the Reverend's wife to look in on Eleanor and bring a meal at midday. Michael took his role as big brother seriously, fetching water for Eleanor and watching over Sarah while his mother rested. The day passed quietly until mid-afternoon, when a knock at the door roused Eleanor from a light doze. Michael peeked out the window. It's Mr. Grant, Mama, he exclaimed. Eleanor struggled to sit up, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance and the general disarray of the sickroom. Let him in, she said, pulling the quilt up to cover her nightgown. Xavier entered cautiously, hat in hand. He carried a large basket covered with a cloth. I heard the news in town, he said by way of greeting. Thought you might need some supplies. Eleanor felt a rush of embarrassment at being seen in such a state, but Xavier's expression showed only concern, not judgment. Thank you, she said simply. That's very kind. Xavier set the basket on the table, where Michael immediately investigated its contents. Look, Mama, there's bread and honey and ham and apples, and he gasped in delight, a candy stick. Xavier smiled at the boy's excitement. The candy's just for you, Michael. For being such a good brother. How did you know I'm a good brother? Michael asked, wide-eyed. Word travels, Xavier replied solemnly. And I know you're a responsible young man. Eleanor watched the interaction, touched by Xavier's thoughtfulness toward her son. Would you like to see the baby? She offered. She's sleeping, but you can peek at her. Xavier approached the cradle beside Eleanor's bed, his expression softening as he gazed at the sleeping infant. She's beautiful, he said quietly, like her mother. The compliment brought color to Eleanor's cheeks. Thank you, we've named her Sarah, a good name. Xavier straightened, suddenly looking uncomfortable, as if aware of the intimacy of the moment. I should go, I don't want to tire you. You're not, Eleanor assured him. And your visit is a welcome distraction. Mrs. Higgins, the Reverend's wife, spent an hour telling me about every difficult birth she's ever witnessed. Xavier's mouth twitched with suppressed amusement. That sounds comforting. About as comforting as a cactus pillow, Eleanor replied dryly. A chuckle escaped Xavier, and the tension in the room eased. He pulled a chair near the bed and sat, entertaining Eleanor with tales of his latest challenge, a spirited young stallion that refused to be saddled. He's got spirit, that one, Xavier said. Reminds me of Midnight when I first got him. All fire and no direction. How did you tame him? Eleanor asked. Xavier smiled. You don't tame a horse like that. You come to an understanding. He needs to know you respect his spirit even as you ask for his cooperation. There was wisdom in the words that extended beyond horsemanship, Eleanor thought. A philosophy for life and perhaps for relationships as well. They talked easily until the sun began to set, Michael occasionally contributing to the conversation but mostly occupied with exploring the contents of Xavier's basket. When William's footsteps sounded on the porch, Xavier rose to leave. Thank you for the basket, Eleanor said. And for the company, Xavier nodded. It was my pleasure. I hope you'll recover your strength quickly. He hesitated. And I hope you and William will still consider my offer about the foreman position. We will, Eleanor promised. Xavier said his goodbyes just as William entered. The two men exchanged brief words on the porch before Xavier rode away. Grant brought food, William observed, eyeing the basket. And news from town, Eleanor added. He was very kind. William nodded slowly. He's a decent man. He moved to the cradle, gazing down at his daughter with a tender expression. How's our Sarah today? Perfect, Eleanor replied, watching her husband with their child. The next week passed in a blur of adjustments to their new family member. Sarah proved to be a good baby, crying only when hungry or uncomfortable. Eleanor regained her strength gradually, though she tired easily and was grateful for William's help in the evenings and Mrs. Simmons's daily visits. On Sunday, William went to Willow Creek Ranch as usual but returned earlier than normal, his expression thoughtful. "Grant showed me the foreman's house," he said as they ate supper. "It's better than I expected. Solid roof, good floor, tight windows. He's had men working on it this past month, getting it ready." "For us?" Eleanor asked, surprised. William nodded. "He said he'd been planning to offer me the position for a while, just waited until the house was habitable." Eleanor considered this new information. That was foresighted of him. "That's one word for it." William set down his fork. "I told him we'd give him our answer by the end of the week, that I needed to discuss it with you properly, now that you're feeling stronger." Eleanor nodded, appreciating her husband's consideration. "When could we move if we accept?" "Right away. The house is ready and Grant seems eager to have the position filled." William hesitated. "There's one more thing. The job comes with a share of the profits once the ranch is established. A small percentage, but it could amount to something substantial in a few years." The offer was generous, more than generous. It suggested a level of trust in William that went beyond a typical employer-employee relationship. "Why?" Eleanor murmured, almost to herself. "Why offer so much?" William met her gaze steadily. "I asked him that. He said good men are hard to find, and he wants someone invested in the ranch's success, not just collecting wages." It made sense, but Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Xavier's offer than simple business acumen. The foreman's house, prepared in advance. The profit-sharing arrangement, the timing of it all. "What do you think we should do?" she asked. William was silent for a moment. "I think we should accept," he said finally. "It's the best opportunity we're likely to get, and it would be good for the children to grow up in the country rather than town." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Away from the saloon," she added softly. "Yes," William agreed, holding her gaze. "Away from the saloon." The decision made, William rode to Willow Creek Ranch the next day to inform Xavier of their acceptance. He returned with details of the move. Xavier would send a wagon for their belongings on Wednesday, and they could be settled in the foreman's house by nightfall. The news of their impending departure spread quickly through Broken Ridge. Some townsfolk offered genuine good wishes, while others, like Sarah Miller, could barely disguise their curiosity and judgment. Moving out to Grant's ranch, so soon after the baby. Sarah commented when she encountered Eleanor at the general store. "People will talk, you know. People always talk," Eleanor replied evenly. "Usually about things that are none of their business." The sharpness of her response surprised Sarah into momentary silence, giving Eleanor the opportunity to complete her purchases and leave. At home, the preparations for the move were well underway. They had few possessions to pack. The hard times had seen to that. But Eleanor took care with what they did have, particularly Michael's wooden toys and the small mementos of her parents. William seemed energized by the change, making plans for their new life with an enthusiasm Eleanor hadn't seen in him since before his accident. He spoke of gardens and livestock, of teaching Michael to ride properly, of building furniture for their new home. "Grant says there's good fishing in the creek," he told Michael, who listened wide-eyed, "and plenty of room for you to run and play." On Wednesday morning, Xavier arrived with the wagon as promised, accompanied by young Ned Wilson. The loading went quickly, with William and Xavier handling the heavier furniture while Eleanor supervised the packing of more delicate items. As they prepared to depart, Reverend Thompson and his wife appeared, ostensibly to bid them farewell, but clearly curious about the arrangement. "This is rather sudden, isn't it?" Mrs. Thompson asked, eyeing the loaded wagon, "with the baby so young and all." "The timing is God's will, surely," Eleanor replied serenely, adjusting Sarah in her arms. "A new life, a new beginning for our family." The Reverend cleared his throat. "Indeed." "Well, we wish you all the best. Mr. Grant is fortunate to have you both working for him." Xavier, overhearing as he secured a trunk, joined the conversation. The good fortune is mutual, Reverend. The Parkers bring skills and character to Willow Creek that will be invaluable. His calm assertion left no room for the Reverend's subtle condescension. Eleanor felt a surge of gratitude for Xavier's support. The journey to Willow Creek Ranch was slow but smoother than Eleanor had anticipated, thanks to Xavier's insistence that she and the children ride in his buckboard rather than the loaded wagon. William drove the wagon with their belongings, following behind. "The foreman's house is just beyond that stand of cottonwoods," Xavier said as they approached the property. "It's not as large as the main house, but it's solid construction." The house came into view as they rounded a bend, a neat, one-story structure with a covered porch and freshly painted white trim. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting someone had prepared for their arrival. "Mrs. Wilson, Ned's mother, has been there this morning," Xavier explained. "Getting things ready for you." Eleanor was touched by the consideration. As they drew closer, she could see flower boxes beneath the windows, filled with bright blooms, and a small vegetable garden already started behind the house. "Oh," she breathed, "it's lovely." Xavier looked pleased at her reaction. "I'm glad you think so. It needed a woman's touch, but I did what I could." Inside, the house was simple but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a good-sized kitchen with a new cook stove, a parlor with a stone fireplace, and a small room off the kitchen that could serve as a nursery for Sarah. The floors were swept, the windows gleamed, and fresh wildflowers stood in a jar on the kitchen table. "Mrs. Wilson left a stew simmering," Xavier said, lifting the lid on a pot that bubbled on the stove. "And there's bread and butter in the pantry. Thought you might appreciate not having to cook after the move." Eleanor felt overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Xavier's expression softened. "It's nothing more than you deserve." His eyes held hers for a moment before he turned away. "I'll help William unload the wagon." By evening, their few possessions were arranged in their new home. Michael had explored every corner of the house and yard, returning with excited reports of a treehouse in a large oak and a family of rabbits living near the garden. After a simple but satisfying meal, William took Michael outside to see the stars, leaving Eleanor alone with Sarah and Xavier, who had stayed to ensure they were properly settled. "The house suits you," Xavier observed as Eleanor rocked Sarah gently by the fire. "It's more than I ever expected," she admitted, "especially after the past year." Xavier watched her with those perceptive gray eyes. "You've endured a lot, both of you have." Eleanor nodded, looking down at her sleeping daughter. "We've been fortunate in our friends." "Is that what we are?" Xavier asked quietly. "Friends?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meanings neither could voice. "Yes," Eleanor said finally. "I believe we are." Xavier nodded, accepting her answer even as his eyes suggested deeper thoughts. "I should go." "You need your rest, and I've intruded long enough." "You haven't intruded," Eleanor assured him. "This is your property after all." "The house is yours," Xavier corrected, "for as long as you want it." The statement carried a weight beyond the obvious. But before Eleanor could respond, the door opened, and William and Michael returned, the boy chattering about the constellations his father had shown him. Xavier took his leave shortly after, promising to meet with William in the morning to discuss the week's work. At the door, he paused, looking back at the domestic scene, Eleanor with the baby, Michael showing William a rock he'd found, the fire crackling warmly in the hearth. "Good night," he said simply, but his eyes held a wistfulness that tugged at Eleanor's heart. After he left, Eleanor and William prepared for bed in their new home, the unfamiliar creaks and settling sounds punctuating the night silence. "It's a good place," William said as they lay in the darkness. "A place where we can start fresh." Eleanor murmured agreement, her thoughts divided between gratitude for their new beginning and a nagging awareness of Xavier's solitary departure to the big, empty main house on the hill. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. William took to his role as foreman with natural ability, organizing the ranch work efficiently and earning the respect of the other hands Xavier hired. Eleanor established her household, planted a larger garden, and cared for Sarah, who grew stronger daily. Xavier was a frequent visitor to their home, often joining them for evening meals and bringing small gifts for the children: a carved wooden horse for Michael, a soft blanket for Sarah. His attention to the children was gentle and thoughtful, and Eleanor often found herself watching the interaction with a complex mixture of emotions. One evening in late September, as autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Xavier stayed after dinner to discuss business with William. The men sat at the kitchen table while Eleanor put the children to bed. When she returned, she found them deep in conversation about expanding the horse breeding program. "The Morgan stallion from Kentucky arrives next week," Xavier was saying. "If we cross him with the quarter-horse mares, we should get foals with both speed and stamina." William nodded, making notes in a ledger. "We'll need to expand the south pasture if the herd grows as planned." "Already in the works," Xavier assured him. "I've hired men to clear the land and set new fence posts next month." Eleanor sat quietly, listening to the men plan the ranch's future. There was no trace now of the bitter, defeated man William had been just months ago. In his place sat a confident ranch foreman, respected by his employer and the other hands alike. As the discussion wound down, Xavier rose to leave. "I almost forgot," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. "This came for you today, Eleanor." He handed her a letter addressed in a familiar hand, her cousin Margaret from St. Louis. "Thank you," Eleanor said, taking the letter. "I've been wondering when she'd write." Xavier nodded, donning his hat. "I'll see you tomorrow, William. Good night, Eleanor." After Xavier left, Eleanor opened the letter, eager for news from her only remaining family. As she read, her expression changed from pleasure to surprise. "What is it?" William asked, noticing her reaction. Eleanor looked up. "Margaret and her husband are moving to Denver. He's been offered a position with the railroad there. She wants us to visit when they're settled." "Denver's not so far," William observed. "We could make the journey next spring, perhaps." Eleanor nodded, returning to the letter. "She also mentions." She paused, rereading a paragraph. "She says there are rumors about us in St. Louis." William frowned. "What kind of rumors?" "Apparently, word has reached even there about our move to Xavier's ranch. Margaret says her friend Mrs. Hollister, who has connections in Colorado territory, told her that people are speculating about the nature of our arrangement here." Eleanor's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. William's expression darkened. "What exactly are they saying?" Eleanor hesitated. "That Xavier has improper feelings for me, that his generosity toward our family is motivated by something other than friendship." William was silent for a long moment. "And what do you think?" he asked finally, his voice carefully neutral. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "I think Xavier Grant is a good man who recognized another good man who had lost his way. I think he saw value in you when others didn't, myself included at times." "That doesn't answer my question, Ellie," Eleanor sighed. "Xavier is our friend, William. He's been kind to us, to all of us. If there's more to his feelings, he's never spoken of them, never acted on them. He's always treated us both with respect." William nodded slowly. "Yes, he has." He rose from the table, moving to stand by the window that looked toward the main house on the hill. "But that doesn't mean the feelings aren't there." Eleanor joined him at the window. "Does it matter?" "If he's never acted on them," William turned to her, his expression serious. "It matters if you share them." The blunt question struck Eleanor like a physical blow. Did she have feelings for Xavier? Had she allowed herself to acknowledge the warmth that spread through her when he smiled, the flutter in her chest when their hands accidentally touched, the way her thoughts turned to him in quiet moments? "William," she began. "Don't," he interrupted gently. "Don't say what you think I want to hear. I need the truth, Ellie, however much it might hurt." Eleanor took a deep breath. "I care for Xavier," she admitted finally. "As a friend, as a man who helped us when we needed it most. But I'm your wife, William. I made vows to you that I intend to keep." William studied her face in the lamplight. Even though I broke mine, even after all I put you through, even then, Eleanor confirmed. We're building something here, William. A new life for ourselves, for our children. That's what matters to me. William was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out, drawing Eleanor into his arms. I don't deserve you, he said softly against her hair. I never have. Love isn't about deserving, Eleanor replied, resting her head against his chest. It's about choosing. Every day we choose. They stood together by the window, the distant light from Xavier's house, a silent reminder of the complicated bonds that tied their lives together. As autumn deepened toward winter, the work on the ranch continued. The Morgan stallion arrived from Kentucky, a magnificent animal that even William admitted was worth every dollar Xavier had paid. The South pasture expansion progressed, and plans were made for constructing additional stables in the spring. Eleanor found herself busier than ever, managing her household, caring for the children, and occasionally helping with lighter ranch work. She still sewed for Xavier, creating curtains and cushions for rooms in the main house as he gradually furnished it. William and Xavier's working relationship developed into a true partnership, with William taking increasing responsibility for the ranch's daily operations, while Xavier handled the business aspects and breeding program. The arrangement suited them both, and the ranch thrived under their joint management. Christmas approached, bringing with it preparations for the holiday. Eleanor baked cookies with Michael's enthusiastic assistance, made simple gifts for the ranch hands, and decorated their home with pine boughs and red ribbons. A week before Christmas, Xavier appeared at their door with a large pine tree strapped to his horse. Thought the children might enjoy decorating a tree, he explained as William helped him bring it inside. Michael was ecstatic, dancing around the tree as it was set up in the corner of the parlor. Even Sarah, now almost 5 months old and alert to everything around her, gurgled with delight at the piney scent filling the house. That was very thoughtful, Eleanor told Xavier as they watched Michael hang paper stars on the lower branches. Xavier smiled, the expression warming his gray eyes. Christmas should be special for children. My mother always made it so, even when we had little else. It was a rare mention of his past. Eleanor had learned that Xavier seldom spoke of his family or his life before coming to Colorado. Will you join us for Christmas dinner? She asked impulsively. Xavier hesitated. I wouldn't want to intrude on your family time. You wouldn't be intruding, William said, joining the conversation. You're your family now in a way. The admission seemed to cost him something, but his expression was sincere. Xavier looked surprised, then touched by the sentiment. Then I'd be honored to join you. On Christmas Day, a light snow fell, turning Willow Creek Ranch into a scene from a storybook. The foreman's house glowed with lamplight and firelight as Eleanor prepared the holiday meal a goose Xavier had provided, potatoes and vegetables from their root cellar, and a spice cake that had been Eleanor's mother's recipe. Xavier arrived in the afternoon, bearing gifts: a rocking horse for Michael, a silver rattle for Sarah, a fine woolen shawl for Eleanor, and a tooled leather belt for William. His generosity was met with their own more modest offerings: knitted gloves from Eleanor, a carved pipe from William, and a drawing of Midnight from Michael. The day passed in warmth and good cheer. After dinner, William played his harmonica while Michael demonstrated his growing skill at recitation, proudly delivering the Christmas story he'd learned for the occasion. Even Sarah contributed, babbling happily from Xavier's lap, where she had been contentedly settled for much of the afternoon. As the short winter day faded to evening, William took Michael outside to look at the stars, a ritual they had established since moving to the ranch. Eleanor moved to take Sarah from Xavier, but he shook his head. She's asleep, he whispered, nodding toward the baby nestled against his chest. I don't mind holding her. Eleanor smiled at the sight of the strong, weathered cowboy cradling her infant daughter with such gentleness. You're good with children, she observed, sitting in the chair opposite him. Have you never wanted a family of your own, after Marlena, I mean? Xavier was silent for a moment, his gaze on Sarah's sleeping face. "I thought that part of life was close to me," he said finally. "After she died, I couldn't imagine loving anyone that way again. And now?" Eleanor asked softly. Xavier looked up, his gray eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Now I know better," he said simply. The admission hung in the air between them, its meaning clear yet carefully contained. Neither spoke for several long moments. Finally, Eleanor said, "Xavier, I don't," he interrupted gently. "You don't need to say anything, Eleanor. I know where things stand and I respect it. I respect you and William and what you're building together." Eleanor nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Thank you." Xavier carefully rose, still holding the sleeping Sarah. "I should put her down and take my leave. It's getting late." Eleanor led him to the small nursery, where Xavier gently laid Sarah in her cradle, his large hand lingering briefly on her dark curls. At the front door, Xavier donned his coat and hat. "It was a fine Christmas," he said. "Thank you for including me." "Thank you for the tree," Eleanor replied, "and the gifts. You were too generous." Xavier smiled. "It was my pleasure." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be leaving for Denver tomorrow. Business with the railroad that can't wait." "On the day after Christmas?" Eleanor asked, surprised. "It can't be helped. I'll be gone about 2 weeks." Eleanor nodded, trying to ignore the pang of disappointment at the news. "Safe travels, then." Xavier studied her face for a moment, as if memorizing it. "Merry Christmas, Eleanor," he said softly, before stepping out into the snowy night. Eleanor watched from the window as he mounted his horse and rode toward the main house, his figure gradually disappearing into the darkness. She was still standing there when William and Michael returned, their cheeks rosy with cold. "Grant left?" William asked, stamping snow from his boots. Eleanor nodded. "He's going to Denver tomorrow on business. He'll be gone 2 weeks." William hung his coat on the peg by the door. "Railroad business again, I expect. He's been working on some deal with them for months." Eleanor helped Michael remove his snowy clothes. He seemed different tonight, more open. William glanced at her but said nothing as he steered a yawning Michael toward bed. Later, as they lay in their darkened bedroom, William said, "Grant told me about his trip to Denver last week. Asked me to oversee everything while he's gone." "He trusts you," Eleanor observed. "Yes." William was silent for a moment. "He also told me why he's going." "Oh," Eleanor turned to face her husband in the darkness. "He's meeting with railroad officials about running a spur line directly to Willow Creek Ranch. If it happens, we could ship horses directly from here without driving them to Broken Ridge first." "That would be a tremendous advantage," Eleanor said. "It would make this ranch one of the most important in the territory," William agreed. "But that's not all he told me." Eleanor waited, hearing something in William's voice that suggested more significant news. "He's considering taking on a partner in the ranch," William continued. "Someone to share the workload and the profits." "Who?" Eleanor asked, though she suspected the answer. "Me." William's voice held a mixture of pride and disbelief. "He's offering me a full partnership, Ellie. 1/3 ownership of everything, the land, the horses, the buildings, all of it." Eleanor sat up in bed, stunned by the magnitude of the offer. "William, that's incredible." "It's more than incredible," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's a chance I never thought I'd have again, to be my own man, to build something that will last, something I can leave to our children someday." Eleanor reached for his hand in the darkness. "Did you accept?" "I told him I needed to discuss it with you first, but yes, I want to accept." "Then you should," Eleanor said firmly. "You've earned this, William, through your hard work, your sobriety, your dedication to this ranch." William squeezed her hand. "There's more to it than that, and we both know it." The unspoken truth hung between them that Xavier's generosity was motivated, at least in part, by his feelings for Eleanor. Feelings he had acknowledged but never acted upon. Feelings that had somehow led not to jealousy and conflict, but to this extraordinary offer. "Does it matter?" Eleanor asked softly. "If the result is good for all of us." William was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking about that a lot," he said finally. About Grant and his reasons and what kind of man he is. He paused. A lesser man would have tried to take you from me, Ellie. God knows I gave him cause and opportunity. But instead he helped me find my way back to you, helped me become the man you deserved all along. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes at the simple truth in William's words. He is a good man, she whispered. The best I've known, William agreed. And if he loves you even from a distance, even silently, I can't find it in my heart to begrudge him that, not when he's been so careful of your honor and mine. Eleanor rested her head on William's shoulder, overwhelmed by the complex emotions of the moment. What happens now? We accept his offer, William said decisively. We build this ranch together, the three of us in our different ways. We create something that will outlast all of us, something for Michael and Sarah and any other children that might come along. As he spoke, Eleanor could see the vision taking shape, Willow Creek Ranch growing and thriving, a legacy for their children, a testament to the unlikely bond between two men who might have been enemies but instead became partners. And at the center of it all, a love story that defied simple telling, not just between husband and wife, but encompassing friendship, respect, and unspoken devotion. I love you, William Parker, she said softly. And I love you, Ellie, he replied, drawing her close. More than I did the day we married, though I wouldn't have thought that possible then. They fell asleep in each other's arms while outside their window, snow continued to fall on Willow Creek Ranch, covering the past and preparing the ground for all that was yet to come. 5 years passed, bringing prosperity and growth to Willow Creek Ranch. The railroad spur line became reality, allowing them to ship horses directly to markets in Denver and beyond. The breeding program flourished under Xavier and William's joint management, producing horses renowned for their quality throughout the territory. The foreman's house expanded to accommodate the growing Parker family, which now included not only Michael and Sarah, but also 3-year-old James, named for William's father. The ranch employed over a dozen hands year-round, with more during busy seasons. Xavier remained a constant presence in their lives, though he maintained a careful distance that respected the boundaries of Eleanor and William's marriage. He was Uncle Xavier to the children, who adored him unreservedly. To William, he was a trusted partner and friend, and to Eleanor he was Xavier, a man who had changed all their lives through his quiet strength and unwavering integrity. On a warm June evening, as Willow Creek Ranch prepared to celebrate its 5th anniversary with a gathering of friends and neighbors, Eleanor stood on her porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples. William had taken the children to help with last-minute preparations at the main house, leaving her a rare moment of solitude. She heard the approach of a horse and turned to see Xavier riding toward her house. He dismounted with the easy grace that still characterized his movements, despite the touch of additional silver in his hair. "Evening, Eleanor," he greeted her, removing his hat. "William said you might need a ride up to the main house." Eleanor smiled. "I was enjoying the sunset." "It's not often I get a quiet moment these days." Xavier nodded, leaning against the porch railing beside her. "It's a beautiful evening, seems fitting for a celebration." 5 years, Eleanor mused. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that we arrived here. Other times it feels like we've always been at Willow Creek." "It's become home," Xavier observed, "for all of us." They stood in companionable silence, watching as the last rays of sun slipped below the horizon. In the distance, lanterns were being lit at the main house, where tables had been set on the lawn for the anniversary dinner. "I have something for you," Xavier said finally, reaching into his pocket. "A small token for the anniversary." He held out a small velvet box. Eleanor took it hesitantly, aware of the significance of the moment. Inside was a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a willow tree, its branches inlaid with tiny pearl leaves. "Xavier, it's beautiful," she breathed. "But you shouldn't have. I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "Something to mark what we've built here, all of us together." Eleanor looked up at him, seeing in his gray eyes all that remained unspoken between them, the love he had never voiced, but that had shaped their lives nonetheless. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Xavier nodded, understanding all she couldn't say. "We should join the others, they'll be waiting." As they walked toward his horse, Eleanor pinned the brooch to her dress. "William told me about your plans to expand the breeding program into California," she said. "It sounds promising." "It is," Xavier agreed. "Though it will mean more travel for me in the coming years." Eleanor glanced at him. "You'll be away more, it seems best," Xavier said quietly. "For everyone." The unspoken truth hung in the air between them that even after 5 years, some feelings hadn't diminished. That distance sometimes remained the only honorable choice. Eleanor nodded her understanding. "The children will miss you, and I them," Xavier replied. "But I'll always come back to Willow Creek. It's home now, as you said." As they approached the main house, Eleanor could see William with the children, helping to light Japanese lanterns that hung from the trees. When he spotted them, he waved, his face breaking into a smile that still had the power to warm Eleanor's heart. "Look at you too," William called as they drew near. "The founder and the first lady of Willow Creek Ranch." Xavier helped Eleanor dismount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a brief moment, as her feet touched the ground, their eyes met in a glance that acknowledged all they had been to each other, all they could never be, and the peace they had found in the life they shared. Then William was there, slipping his arm around Eleanor's waist, admiring the brooch Xavier had given her, drawing them both toward the gathering of friends and neighbors waiting to celebrate the ranch's success. As the evening progressed, filled with good food, music, and laughter, Eleanor found moments to observe the two men who had shaped her life in such unexpected ways. William, sober and confident, the respected co-owner of one of the finest ranches in Colorado, and Xavier, dignified and warm, the architect of their shared prosperity. They were an unlikely trio, bound together by circumstances that might have led to tragedy, but instead had forged something rare and precious. Not the conventional love story Eleanor had once imagined for herself, but something richer and more complex, a tapestry woven of choices, sacrifices, and unspoken devotion. As the celebration wound down and the last guests departed, Eleanor stood with William and Xavier on the porch of the main house, gazing out at the ranch that had become their shared legacy. "To Willow Creek," Xavier said, raising his glass in a final toast, "and to all that lies ahead." "To Willow Creek," William and Eleanor echoed, their glasses touching in the moonlight. In that moment, Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that whatever the future held, Xavier's travels, the children's growth, the ranch's expansion, the bonds they had formed would endure. That in this place, beside this creek, they had created not just a successful horse ranch but a home where broken lives had been mended, where dreams had taken root and flourished, where love in all its complicated forms had found expression. Her husband had once spent their food money on drink, leaving their table empty. And a cowboy had indeed filled that table with plenty. But the greater gift, Eleanor reflected as she stood between the two men who had shaped her destiny, was not the food itself but the harvest of hope, redemption, and belonging that had grown from those humble beginnings. A harvest that would feed their souls for all the years to come.